I think that the only way to sell is to be human. As a leader, you have to start by connecting with yourself before you can communicate or convince anybody to want anything that you have to offer. Research has shown that the three most stressful things that can happen in a person's life is to move cities, get married/divorced, or find a new job. And as a recruiter, I could be asking them to do two of those three things. My grandfather was an orphan who was dropped off at a Buddhist monastery in a very small rice village in China. At the end of his career, he was a 4-star general. He had taught himself math. He had taught himself how to read. He had taught himself art and music. He had taught himself to dress. Somebody took a chance on me at Google. I did my graduate work at Berkeley in classical civilizations, Greek and Roman civilizations. And she said, "Oh, that's what we're afraid of at Google. We're afraid that we will scale ourselves into mediocrity. What would you do if we created a role for you to come here and do that?" And I was like, if you're joking, that's cruel. If you're not, that's amazing. I saw by the light of a naked light bulb in like the back pantry, a 10-year-old teaching an 8-year-old how to do math. And it was as if they were saying in that moment, I do not believe that this is going to be my forever. I believe that one day there will be a better tomorrow, and I will live like that today.
All right. Hello. Welcome to another episode of the Sell by Being Human podcast. I'm your host, Alex Smith, and this is the podcast where we learn from people in all walks of life who sell things through the lens of human connection. We can learn human skills from people all around us, and this is the podcast where I bring the very best of those people together. And I have one of those people here today. This is a guy who's had an awesome career in tech. He's been a data specialist at Google. He's worked for Google Ventures, where he's worked with lots of exciting startups and founders to help coach them and grow their businesses. He's watched Uber grow from a 50-person company to a few hundred to what they are today. So has had experience with them in their early days. So this is somebody that's been all over. He's also been a technical recruiter in his career for Google. He's worked in many different roles. And currently he is the founder of his own company, where he is the executive coach and founder of Emboldened LLC, where he works with small teams. He helps them scale without losing their edge, and helps leaders grow with purpose and trust. I am so excited to welcome none other than Maximos Lih to the podcast. Welcome, Maximus.
Hello, everyone. Thanks, Alex. So excited to be here.
All right. So, Maximus, what excited me when we were introduced is you have this interesting backstory with your family coming over. Your grandfather being a general in the army in China, and all of these people that came to you afterwards to tell you about your experience. About their experience with your grandfather and what they learned, and what I feel like you've learned and taken away from him. And I feel like that's showed up a lot in different roles as a technical recruiter, and also working with startups at Google Ventures. So this podcast is all about connecting with people, and I'm sure you connected with people in tons of ways over stories about your grandfather. So Maximus, when I say the term to you of the podcast, sell something, but sell it by being human, what comes to mind for you when you hear that phrase, and what's that mean to you?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that the first thing that I want to say is it's a real honor, right, to be in a podcast and a guest with a community that shares so many of the things that I really care about as a coach and as a person. I think that the only way to sell is to be human. And, as a leader, sometimes that means you have to start by connecting with yourself before you can communicate or convince anybody to want anything that you have to offer that you think is valuable. Like, what is the self-awareness that you have to connect with? And the second thing is always, when you're in a room with somebody and you're trying to create momentum for any kind of change, whether that be culture change, organizational change, recruiting change, right, sales change, to be really aware that change is stressful. I remember when I was early at Google, we would say, research has shown that the three most stressful things that can happen in a person's life is to move cities, get married slash divorced, or find a new job. And as a recruiter, I could be asking them to do two of those three things. So be very, very aware that the things that you're trying to close them to do is something that comes with a huge amount of anxiety and disruption. And so if you lack that sense of connection, you'll never actually develop the kind of long-term relationships or the kind of, I am so proud to see you in this role where we get to work next to each other's buildings and thrive. You'll never get that sense of connection to your own purpose or success to what the role could mean in a career, because you've forgotten that it's not about checking a box or putting a button in the seat or making this quota. You're asking somebody to change something, and change is always prone to anxiety and can touch identity if you do it properly.
Yeah, I liked what you said. I mean, just understanding, like to tap into yourself, but then understanding, like, look, it is difficult. Change comes with an anxiety, so it's our jobs to take down that anxiety. So, help me understand a little bit about. I mean, you came from change. You were birthed in change, right? I mean, I feel like,
Right.
coming over from, and maybe tell people a little bit about your backstory, but from what I understand, I mean, if you looked on paper at the life of your grandfather, you might not. I mean, he might not even in his wildest dreams think that he would have a son who'd have another son who would be working in Silicon Valley and working for Google, and maybe owning his own business in the U.S. Right? So tell me a little bit about what you saw about how people in your family navigated change, and how they helped you maybe growing up navigate change.
Yeah, and I tell the story a lot, but my grandfather, uh, was an orphan who was dropped off at a Buddhist monastery in a very small rice village in China. And when he was growing up all the way through to 14, 16 years old, when he would be trying to work or make money or apprentice just to do the things that people normally did to be a part of that village, he would often hear comments, right? You better watch this person a little bit more closely. They might steal. They're probably lazy because you must come from bad blood. Otherwise, why would you have been abandoned at birth? Like that was that sort of perception of being in a small town. And one day he just kind of said, I'm really fed up with this. This is not fair. I want more out of life than this. And he ran away and lied about his age and joined the military, joined the army. And, long story short, at the end of his career, he was a 4-star general. He had taught himself math. He had taught himself how to read. He had taught himself art and music. He had taught himself to dress. Like he was somebody who, by switching the environment and how people cared about the connection that they could have with somebody who didn't look great on paper in many ways, or who had something that was a mysterious and questionable past in many ways. They just sort of saw the human that was there, a human that was full of potential. And in my family, it was never ever the case that we heard the story and then just thought, pull yourself by your bootstraps. Like that was never ever the story that we told. It was always the story of when you find the right environment and people who believed in you, it would be transformative. It was never ever sort of taken for granted that mm, a commanding officer has to approve, right? Somebody to teach my grandfather how to read in their spare time. And somebody has to be generous enough to want to do that and patient enough to want to do that, right? Because there's not a lot of spare time in the military and you live through war. But something about that environment just said, well, you're a human. Why wouldn't we say yes? Why wouldn't we default to yes? And I think that there was that aspect of it that opened up a lot of different opportunities and a lot of different decisions and choices that then also prompted my father, right, as the youngest of 5 in his family, to say, what if I found a different environment for a different kind of striving, a different kind of success? Because I'm not a literature math guy. I'm a technology and science guy. And I think that the US is going to be a better place for me to understand my own potential. And so then my dad came here to do his PhD in at UC Santa Barbara. We joined him a year later, and sort of like the rest is history. I saw Silicon Valley change from being still quite agrarian in some ways to, right, all tech, nothing else. Yeah. I saw technology go from like really weird sounding MIDI keyboards, right, to AI generated, emo and, electronic music that is rivaling artists and now we have to protect, artist creativity. And those things continue to come back to me in the question of who are the humans that we are seeing and treating with dignity so that they can actually achieve their potential? And who are the eyes and ears that are listening and watching out for the humans, not just the production or the outcomes or the metrics, but the humanity of what people can become?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, yeah, and like, what an inspired story. When you say like, who are the eyes and the ears for people around us? Because it's so easy. I feel like people aren't always so willing to ask for help and for change as maybe your grandfather was. And there could be, I'm sure, so many other orphans that were in that same situation that would say, yeah, you're right. Maybe it's, I just was born in the wrong circumstances, and I have to deal with it, and didn't maybe resisted change because they just believed everyone around them, but I don't know if it was just trying to prove people wrong or out of frustration or anger, or just the fact that he was looking for more, or maybe his true parents, had some DNA in him, but that story, I'm sure, that trickles down to, like you said, it's not just a just make it happen mindset, right? It's more of, oh, like, you need help from others to succeed, and we have to be the eyes and ears for that. So tell me a little bit about what, like, what that looks like. What did that look like early on in your career, like being the eyes and ears at a company for someone's potential? Because I have to imagine you may have come across in an interview people that may have been overlooked by others, or people that on paper maybe weren't as good as others, but you said yes to. Tell me what that may have looked like with you, being the eyes and ears for somebody in
I,
your
I
career.
think, yeah, I mean, I'll tell two stories. I think that, one of them leads to sort of a company that we ended up working with that I still believe very much in. And the other one was just like, I think that our first experience with that is oftentimes how people get to us, right? So somebody took a chance on me at Google. I did my graduate work at Berkeley in classical civilizations, Greek and Roman civilizations. And got contacted by a recruiter to go talk to somebody about technical recruiting at Google. And I just wanted a job, and Google sounded great. So I went to the interview where I was grilled on search and, recruiting best practices on LinkedIn. And I didn't have great answers for any of those things. So finally, the, interviewer, a woman who later became my manager, said, do you have any referrals at Google? And she's just trying to find something like to give me an
How
opportunity.
are you here?
Oh yeah, Google, like, it's just like you just don't give recruiter answers. And I'd say, yeah, I don't know very much about recruiting. I know more than anyone would care to know about the rise and fall of the Roman Empire. And she kind of like paused for a moment and she said, oh, that's what we're afraid of at Google. We're afraid that we will scale ourselves into mediocrity. What would you do if we created a role for you to come here and do that? And I was like, if you're joking, that's cruel. If you're not, that's amazing. And she's like, your start date is February 14th. Try to be on time. And that was like how I got my first job at Google. I was a data specialist within the technical recruiting team. And we were basically running analytics to figure out how Google would not fall like the Roman Empire even though it was on the rise. So somebody saw the potential in me, right? In all of my fumbling, 25, 26-year-old self and just said, I think the potential here is worth investing in. And, how bad would it be if I was wrong? He seems like he would be hardworking. Right? So like, that's the first experience. It's just like having somebody give that to me and feeling an obligation to
Mm,
pay that.
nice.
But that's the example of somebody who was in the process of doing a job, hiring recruiters for her team, with an additional set of awareness and eyes and ears to say, but this is somebody that I could actually, I think I could invest in a different way, in a systemic way,
Yeah.
and should shine on me, right? The second story that I'll tell is I've been privileged to do a lot of volunteer vacations in various parts of the world, and I remember a story from a trip to Uganda during some of the worst internal turbulence and war in Uganda. Over the last 20 years, there was a man named Joseph Coyne. He raised a terrorist army. It was a child army, people who would become kidnapped and brainwashed to kill their own family and then be conscripted into this army. And they would go from village to village, child soldiers that would range from 8 years old to 16 years old. And it took a long time for them to put down that unrest. But during the worst period of that, children would have to walk to these giant warehouses of 500, 700 kids because that was the only place that they can sleep somewhat peacefully at night. It was harder to attack these large warehouses. And there was a night where walking through and you would sometimes they would be scared. They wouldn't be there with their parents. They would be crying. Sometimes they would be cold. Like we would sort of like go and just check in to see if everybody was okay. And I remember a story where when we were debriefing, somebody said, I saw the most amazing thing. I saw by the light of a naked light bulb in like the back pantry, a 10-year-old teaching an 8-year-old how to do math. And it was as if they were saying in that moment, I do not believe that this is going to be my forever. I believe that one day there will be a better tomorrow and I will live like that today. And I remember that story so powerfully because it's just a beacon of hope and resilience, right? But it also then we invested in a company called Andela, which is all about how you recruit, right? Remote Africa engineers to be able to take part in various technical companies. I was also a co-investment with the Chan Zuckerberg Foundation. And their belief was talent knows no geographic boundaries. And so the disproportionate, right, economy is not because of a lack of talent or training. It's because of a lack of eyes to be able to recognize the talent when it crosses a geographic boundary that we don't recognize. And I remember just being so on fire for that investment to go through because I remember that story and was like, you know, what your eyes can miss actually it is a loss for everyone. And it was just really important that then from an investment portfolio, I was just like so proud that we had that company in the portfolio and that I could go right and visit them when their headquarters in New York and be like, what else can I be doing to help you? Who are the people? How can I help you storytell so that we can understand and communicate the value of this resource to people who are hurting for talent, especially for junior engineers?
Mm. Yeah, it's such a small world. I can't believe you mentioned them. I actually in my day job, was lucky to work with them, in some of their learning efforts and with my current company. So that's so amazing. I that story just says to me like, there's hope. There's this idea that just as a basic human need, we have this desire for better, call it hope, call it optimism or something like that, because, in that moment, they just forgot about their current situation. But it's like, I just want to help this person that like looks like me, that's younger than me, that hopefully, can use this and, have more opportunity to me. So it's this, I think that's this thing that maybe we overlook, but that person that saw that is like, this is why we're here. This is like the future. This is like the call to us, all to maybe, have a deeper set of eyes for this stuff. So, let me ask this, because a lot of people, look through and look at sales as, hey, this is At the end of the day, Alex, like if I'm selling something, this feels like maybe I resist it because at the end of the day, there's money involved, there's some type of exchange involved or assumption involved that I want something from you or I need something for you, and maybe there's all these like things that these stereotypes that go on, so people kind of resist the being told that they're selling anything, right? But you were absolutely doing that as a recruiter. You're absolutely doing that as a coach. So talk to me a little bit about, um, some of the skills you employ to do some of these things where you look beyond someone. Maybe it's, I don't know, kind of listening. It's seeing. But tell me what you lean on to break through some of these connections and to connect. Because that story of that recruiter, I mean, she was just looking for something. So maybe that's a skill of curiosity, I guess. But yeah, tell me, how you like to think about certain skills and maybe using them when you're in a situation that requires you to create change.
Yeah, I would say that I tend to start most of my calls or conversations with two things. One, I really want to name that I'm not trying to make any assumptions here. And then two, I want to name that talented people have options. Right. My favorite boss at GB used to say, we just assume that everybody here is a volunteer because talented people have options. So they volunteered to be here. And it just made me feel so respected, right? And like honored the fact that he would make that comment. So if I'm going into a call with somebody that is like a business call, I'll often start by saying, I'm sure you get these kinds of messages all the time, and you're probably sick of them. What was it about this one, that made you decide you wanted to get on an annoying call with a salesperson, right? I'll sort of like do that. And I just name that, right? Like, I think by naming the context, it's sort of like sometimes when you're in a first date situation or you're in a conversation with a new person and you're like, this is so weird. All right. Immediately you've taken a
Yeah,
lot of the
anxiety
anxiety.
down.
Right. You've just created a release valve for everything. And then and it's basically saying, I'm not making any assumptions about agendas here. Right. Cause that's weird. And I know that this is weird. So it really like cuts down the posturing. And once again, it allows me to operate from a place where I am not self-conscious because I literally just name that I feel awkward. Something about that really just like allows me to stop trying to be more put together or anything like that. The second thing is I do think that there is a power in asking questions that enable people um, to like say yes to you. Right. So I like a lot of what I will teach people when I'm coaching, or, when I'm doing business development is don't don't assume that you're going to say this. Like, it doesn't matter what script you practice. You cannot give the same script to everyone, right? So the first 30 seconds is like, oh, what am I going to mirror? Or what am I going to be able to name that allows somebody to feel seen and heard?
Hmm.
And that could be as easy as your name is Alex, right? Yes, right? Is this still a good time to chat? Yes, right? Now all of a sudden I've done things that actually like are making you feel seen and heard in some way, right? Um, it could be something as complicated as, um, when I look at your resume, I notice that you are not somebody who likes to go narrow and narrow in scope, and that everything has been a fight for going broader and more cross-functional. And that's something that then makes them feel incredibly seen. And they're like, oh, like that's really, I hadn't heard it articulated in that way. Like, tell me where that comes from. Right. And that, allows us to lean into curiosity and then that humanness. I'm trying to get to know your motivations and right. And that's kind of where any kind of persuasion is not going to come from me knowing what's good for you, right? But it's coming from a lot of learning and then trying to figure out what you need more than what I need you to do for me.
I like that. Um, I think when people can feel seen, heard, understood, they're, a flip switches, and we're just people getting to know each other, and we take the business context or the agenda out of it because we both will have our own. I'm sometimes any coach that I've interviewed on this, it's I always hear like that's a different dynamic. So it's a lot of times, even though someone may need help, you're not the right coach for them. They may need coaching, but you have to identify, am I the right person for you? And also like, what are they looking for? Not, people sometimes may think they need coaching, but they're really looking for, an advisor or um, maybe they're looking for a partner or consultant or, a wide range of things. So, I'm curious how you identify what people really need. Because a lot of times I've had coaches say, look, like, I went through a great coaching call, but sometimes people just, um, yeah, if I don't think I can help them, if they're not somebody that really is open to coaching, I can't force you. I can't force, um, my worldview on you, right? Like I have to take my approach, but understand, that all of your coaching clients look at you differently. Like you have the same skills, but they're filtering you differently through their experiences, their worldview, how their emotional state. So, how do you identify if somebody is right for you, and how do you help people feel comfortable in hopefully being transparent with you to tell you what
You
they
know,
need?
yeah, I think that there are a couple of things that I've learned, in coaching. The first one is coaching is always by definition aspirational, and it will always touch at least 30% of identity. So oftentimes when I'm doing an orientation call, I'll say it's mindset, skill set, and tool set. All right. If you don't do all three, we're just doing behavior modification. That's HR work. That's not coaching work. Right. So if you get referred to me because people think you're rude, and you're like, I just want some tips. I just want like some behavior tips. Like, yeah, like I can make I can have an HR conversation with you, right? If people say you're rude, it's probably because you're interrupting people, you're looking at your phone too much and you're late, right? Like, and like you stop those three things and they're not going to complain anymore. And you will not be my problem as an HR person. But if I were a coach that says like, oh, people think that you're rude right now, you don't think that's fair because you feel like you do a lot for the company and you're not getting credit for it. What is the kind of leader that you want to be? And what do you want people to take away from your leadership when you're in the same room with them? That's an aspirational path. It's a different, right? It's not just skill set and tool set anymore. It's actually much more mindset first and then leads to those three. And so I think, first of all, every coach has a very different framework for how they think about it. I think in terms of the three sets, other coaches think, it's all mindset. There's no skill set needed. If you need a lot of skills development, it's probably because you were not underqualified for the job and you should just get out of that as quickly as possible. Right. So like, I think that there's different perspectives there, but it's that aspirational quality that differentiates how the coaching relationship and how the coaching chemistry ultimately aligns or does not align. The second thing that I really believe in is that you make values-based decisions, not only business outcomes related decisions. So I'll ask, right, what do you want people to take away from your leadership? And if somebody says, I just want to win, I'm like, oh, I'm not sure that that's a value that I'm good at coaching for. You probably want a performance coach who has more athletic, right, like experience because they're going to push you in a way that like we're playing the championships every week, like we got to win. And I also differentiate sometimes when I'm doing team leadership coaching, the difference between companies that are building championships teams versus Olympic teams. And what do I mean by that? A lot of startups, how they're different from public companies or, private companies that intend to stay private is you're building teams that come back to win next year, right? Come back with quarter over quarter profits, revenue growth, right? Come back with year after year, 500, 100 top like nominations. And the people that you hire and the way that you compensate them in cash varies because you got to come back next year and play this game again. All right. So like professional NBA players are optimizing for earning potential for the next contract because they got to come back next year and win it again. Olympic teams do not get paid very much, right? We are not trying to optimize for earning potential. And we do not generally expect them to come back year after year. Olympic, right? Like people who really do well in Olympic, they retire and do TED Talks. They don't, negotiate their contract for 500% more cash next year. But you're hiring a very different kind of person, predominantly unknown entities who are amateur, predominantly motivated based off of purpose, vision, and team spirit, and people who are really fighting for something based like with the luxury of genetic anomaly, right, and talent, right? Like you're like 2% of the genetic, at least of the population. So those two types of coaching is really different. If I'm coaching for somebody and I need them to come back year over year and to build a dynasty over a 50, 100-year period, the leadership, risk-taking, communication, aspirational qualities are very, very different. And versus if you're playing Olympics, like take more risks, right? Hire people that have no experience, will never work well in a PR essay, right? But you think you can push them really hard and they believe the things that you want them to believe, which means that you have to lead from an extremely values-based kind of place. And I'm a good risk tolerance person. I've been in venture, I've been in startups. I worked every startup like they were going to be the ones who made $1 billion for me until they proved me wrong. And I'm not somebody who really is looking at it and be like, oh, the odds are this one isn't going to make it. This one is going to make it. I'll spend more time with this one. And so I think that that's another place. So where understanding the aspirations and the values of the person that you're sitting across from, which in itself is an empathy, curiosity, right? Helping them to feel seen and heard exercise is what determines the trust that allows us to be successful at coaching coach.
Mm. I like your approach of like asking like values-based questions, like when you were, leaning into like, what are you, and not just, kind of what do you want, but like, what are you hoping that brings to you? I don't know how you exactly worded it, but what are you hoping that like, that leads to, and like, what's important to you as it relates to that? And like, cause yeah, there's all different things that we value. I'm, you right now you're coaching like executives and teams. What does that look like? Maybe like when you were coaching startups and founders and things like that, because I'm sure that's even more, somebody that might be resistant to change. I mean, they're coming to you maybe for guidance, but when you have a baby and like your company is your baby, and like here's this guy Max who's telling me, I need to do something maybe I don't want to do, or I think that is bad for the business. How did you get, and I'm sure, not everyone, not all of your startups founders listened to every word that you said, but how did you try to, to get them to, kind of follow maybe a different path or to change in the face of knowing that, this was so connected to their identity, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I would say, gosh, like the biggest difference between doing it from a VC where I was a partner at Google Ventures versus doing it now with Embolden is I do not have to be asked a question, and I also don't get the privileges that come with representing the board or the investor when I go into an office. So there were multiple times where when I show up in an office, a lot of times I'll hear a lot of, if I park myself next to the cafeteria, people will come up and tell me all of the secrets, right? And all the complaints, because they think that maybe I'm here to get rid of the VP or I'm here to get rid of the CEO. I must fully serve because I'm trying to get rid of somebody. And that makes trust building extremely difficult because there's sort of like the threat of this, the behemoth power money behind me. Whereas now I'm so much more free to say, you're the client, right? I'll work with the board. I obviously respect the input from the board. I've been on the board and know how hard that job is, but like it's about you. And if you disagree with the board, I'm not on the board side, right? So I think that's a one significant place where just the tone and the work to be able to like close somebody to do the work is fundamentally different. One feels much more obligated and the other one feels much more free and agency based. The second thing is it's actually the same problem. If you are in the life stage where I specialize, which is Series A and Series B, 100% of the leadership that you have struggle with what got you here won't get you there. All right. So when you were 10 people in an office, working Sundays and Saturdays, fighting for survival, closing every deal so that you could just make some money and not go out of business. And now all of a sudden we gave you $40 million and told you to scale. There's a lot of work to convince them to say, you don't have to try to close every deal anymore. Actually, like you have to, a fast no is going to scale you much better than doing a lot of custom work to close every single person who says that they might be interested. But the identity is, I literally got here. The only reason you gave me the money, right? The only reason you didn't die was because we did this, right? Because all hands on deck meant everybody working on a Sunday. And now I'm coming in and saying, I want you to collect logos in your sleep. That's what I want, right? So what does it mean to be the CEO of a company that collects logos in your sleep? And it's like, you'll see the challenge of like, how do I wrap my mind around this thing that you're telling me, which feels inconceivable, right? Nothing that I've done over the last year and a half. Like, I thought you were going to say, how do I close clients in 10 days instead of 30 days? I didn't think you were going to say logos in my sleep, right? That means I get to sleep sometimes, right? And you'll just see through all of the mental, right, thrash. And so that like all hands on deck means divide and conquer. It means automation. It doesn't mean working set, right? But and it is that what got you here isn't going to get you there. And I can change your behavior. I can put in policies. I can say work-life balance and use the buzzwords. But if the mindset that doesn't get there, it's when you're stressed, you're going to revert back to the old pattern. And then I will not have anything to be able to pull on as a coaching lever to convince you otherwise, because you're like, it's a survival moment. I have to do this, right? I have to micromanage. I have to crack down. I have to do right 996. And, but the person who's able to say like, oh, no. I used to be the CEO of a company that was just trying to survive. And I'm growing to become the CEO of a company that collects logos in my sleep. Okay, there are some different patterns, right? And like every I wake up and I choose a different, identity.
Yeah. I'm it's just kind of also how you say it, because it just totally interrupts their pattern of how people talk to them, because they may, kind of coddle them a little bit and just, maybe focus on the tactical things to do in the business. But, if you're generally like, okay, well, what does that mean? I don't get that. Like, how do I do that? Then like a conversation opens up. Okay, we need to think about it differently, because, right, like this stage company isn't the same company. It's the same. It has the same soul, has the same people. Maybe we're hiring more, but we have to have a different, fundamentally different strategy for each of these different phases, and we have to align on what that is. So that's what I hear you say. I'm curious. What do you think? Like you said, like the biggest thing to think about is like what got you here won't get you there. What things do you help people on to make decisions, and to like get clear on making decisions? Because I feel like a lot of your job, your whole career has been helping founders make $1 million, sometimes multi-million dollar decisions. And these are, there's a lot of fear in these decisions, right? If they go wrong, I'm costing dozens of people, maybe hundreds of people a job. I'm a failure. So it goes to all that, kind of identity stuff. But how do you like tamper down the fear, or at least, help them, gain clarity with decisions?
Yeah. So, and I'll just share what I love about being able to cast a vision for something that people then aspire to and change behavior around is how emotional like the relief. I've had people where I was like, let me just throw this out there. Like, what would it mean to be the CEO of a company that collects logos in your sleep, and had the CEO burst into tears?
Oh, wow.
And that would be a dream. I'm so tired. I've been working so hard, right? Like,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and you like what you got like 7 years ahead of you. You have
Yeah.
4 to 7 years, right? Like,
Yeah.
well, they just like start to cry. Like that would be amazing. And that's not a problem solving conversation, right? That's an
Yeah.
aspiration. That's a dream casting conversation, right? I'm not guaranteeing you're gonna figure it out, but like, let's start taking one step towards it, right? And the second thing is, I don't believe in doing like gap analysis for coaching people. I always come at it from a strength-based perspective. What is the superpower that you have? How do we leverage that superpower orthogonally to be able to get to the places that are not are unnatural or feel out of your comfort zone? Because we can always hire somebody whose superpower is your weakness. Like we can always do that, right? And that's easier than having coaching conversations that come from a place of deficit. You've been working so
Trying to get
hard.
back. Yeah.
You're not good at this, and you've never seen it modeled well. But I need you to do these three things and become a different person with this totally, alien strength. And it's like, oh, so I've just told somebody they're not good enough. And like, that's not a great place. And that's also not a value that's really going to drive. It's incompatible with the aspirational statement that I'm trying to cast, right? With the vision that I'm trying to cast. So, like, if they're like, you close every deal, and now I want you to collect logos in your sleep, but you're good at making money. Like, I'm not worried about you for that, right? What I think we need to do is channel that into discovering flywheels rather than 100% batting average. How can we do that? Right? That's a strength-based approach into something that actually doesn't feel like it's got a lot of inertia that I have to overcome to get to it. Right? Whereas if I said, you've always done closing every deal, you know, and that's not going to scale. So what I need you to do is to create a different kind of sales funnel, track it in a different way, right? And think like a VP of sales instead of the CEO of a small company, right? That's much harder. Like
Yeah.
that gap
Yeah. Yeah.
is much harder, even though at the end of the day, they'll probably arrive at the same place,
Yeah.
right?
That's
When I talk
yeah.
about like flywheels versus a dashboard, it's pretty much just the same thing. And
Yeah. Yeah.
one of them feels like I gotta take a Coursera course, right? And the other one feels like, oh, it's just like a little tweak of something that I
Yeah.
already.
Yeah. I like how you said that like there's all this inertia, and you're looking for the path of the least resistance or the least inertia, coming back at you because you're actually a collab. I hear a lot of collaboration in that phrase of, hey,
Uh-huh.
we like in order to collect logos in your sleep, in order to do that, we need, we would, you would want to think about having this like flywheel approach and, and how would we do that? So you're not like suggesting like you need to do this. It's like, how would we do this? So it's like
Uh-huh.
that shift from you should be doing or like, and some people like I recommend versus like, all right, this is what based on my experience, what I'm hearing you say is, so based on that, what I'm thinking you would build is, well, how would we go about doing that? Even though you kind of know the answer, you want to involve them in the final decision. And you could say, okay, yeah, that would be one thing. We might want to think about adding that, doing that. Like, how do you think about that? Like, and so they're arriving at it's their decision. It's not you taking away that from them. Is that, kind of what you're
Yeah.
doing?
Absolutely. And I think that once again, we go back to that human connection, right? I'm really coaching from a place of helping somebody feel seen and heard, as opposed to helping them to see my expertise.
Hmm. Hmm.
I'm like, I am reflecting back to them what I see and how I see them, which is, that's my grandfather's story. That's my story, right? It didn't say, we can bring you into Google and train you to be a recruiter. They said, oh, great, right? I have a place for you to do exactly the things that feel
Mm.
natural.
Mm.
And then, it didn't take 4 months before just being surrounded by technical recruiters gave me curiosity about recruiting. And then I started to learn those
Yeah.
things, right? So I think that is so important especially when we have memorized a bunch of product knowledge and
Mhm.
business knowledge. And it's like, I'm just waiting for the opening for me to like regurgitate the thing that it took me so long to learn and memorize, right? Like I have knowledge I want to share with you. So if they say like, how do you think you can solve my problem? Be like, I have many solutions. Solution one is this costs this, right? Like you kind of go down that road. Whereas I think that if you're saying, right, what I what I love about, you is that I think you're actually you can walk into any room and get the tone of the room. You're really good at reading the room, right? So I think that it's just a matter of like writing those things down before you forget, and we'll figure out how to deliver the feedback from there, right? And it's like we'll create the channels that will actually like allow you to be able to do that because you don't like confrontation or something. But that feels like, oh yeah, I'm already assessing and analyzing all the time. If I just recorded it, then I figure out how do I say it out loud. But it's not like I don't like to give feedback and now I need to learn how to do feedback. There's an method, there's a radical candor method, right? And all of a sudden it's like my expertise as a coach that's being seen and not their superpowers and strengths as a person that's really being recognized.
I love that. I feel like this could go a lot of different places, and I think you ended off well. It's like you're thinking about like someone's expertise as a person and framing your questions, framing your mind around someone's who someone is, their expertise, not your expertise. Like we can all have expertise in something, but it's how people view your expertise. Is so key because people can look at your expertise in a very negative light, like you're pushing it on, you're very condescending maybe even, or you're know-it-all, or maybe even you think you're not doing those things, and maybe you're just giving people unsolicited advice, which I don't know if you're married or not, but like, no, if you've ever been on the receiving end of unsolicited advice, it doesn't feel good. Like I didn't ask your opinion,
Yeah.
but we still like receiving help. We still like help, but when it's come to from a place of listen, like I love what you do. I love this is what you're good at. You know, like here's some things you might think about doing, but I could be wrong, but this is what I'm hearing you say, and this is what you need it to mean. You could do a couple of these three things. What do you think about that? It's much different than you need to do this, or you're thinking of it like this. You're all wrong. You need to change your way of thinking. It feels very attack. Like I'm being attacked, right? So.
Well, and I think that Alex, one of the things that has happened with so much content on Twitter and Reddit and TED Talks and everything is that we are often doing our own sense of development as well as like any kind of coaching from the perspective of comparing somebody to an imaginary perfect person because there's so much advice, right? I've coached somebody where was really feeling very overwhelmed, first time in an executive director chair. And I said, like, what are your values? And she said, I love vulnerability from Brene Brown. I love How to Do Hard Things by Ben Horowitz. I love what Jeff Bezos does for Amazon. And I love Steve Jobs. And I was like, those are four people with four different businesses, four different superpowers, and none of them are your business and none of them are you, right? And it was like, I want all those things, and explain them all those things. And I want to learn from the success of all those things. And it was such a curiosity and a humble place. And it was an impossible standard. Right. And it was like, oh no, you've actually taken yourself as a human out of this. And let's not even talk about the fact that all of these very filtered, glorified biographies don't tell the whole story. It's impossible, right? But you are holding yourself and saying like, oh, I got to do all those four things, otherwise I'm not a good leader. And when somebody comes into that conversation and says like, can I invite you to think about this differently? What I think you're really strong at are these three things. And if I had to guess, the two values that I think you resonate with are these and this and this. I think that like you would make very different choices, right? Right. So that's a
Yeah,
kind of
yeah, yeah,
conversation, but it
yeah.
also is restoring, right? I'm restoring the human that you are as an individual, as a unique snowflake, right? In a very specific, particular kind of business, and then saying, all right, look, we build the role around the superpowers of the person in place, not the fictional archetype of what that
Mm.
person is supposed to be. There's no supposed to be in this conversation. The coaching does not require supposed to be, you know? Um,
Two B's. Yeah,
it's
yeah,
like, yeah,
yeah.
100%,
You
right? It's
are,
like,
or yeah, it requires you
right,
are. Yeah,
right.
yeah,
You are and you are becoming.
yeah,
And those
yeah,
are the two things that matter.
yeah, yeah.
And so I think that those the stuff where, and when you see people start to like really embrace that unapologetically, the way that they interact with their team, the way that they don't need to feel indispensable, the way that they release control, it's all really different because it's really coming from like, oh yeah, right. If I'm collecting logos in my sleep, then I don't know everything that's going on in the company, but I could be able to like look up a dashboard and see if we succeeded or not. Great. Do that. Right. Um, and in the case of that executive, I was like, you care about generosity and you care about people having access to mental health regardless of their socioeconomic class. That's a justice instinct. Okay, right. So like none of those things apply because Steve Jobs is not doing that. Jeff Bezos is not interested in doing that, right? Like that's not a design question or a product question. That's a partnerships issue. That's a community organizing issue, right? Let's filter your strengths to be able to do it from that place. And then all of a sudden, right, she stands up with her head held high and just goes like, oh, you know what? That's right. I don't have to live up to any of those standards. They are irrelevant to what I am trying to build here and the person that I am becoming and the leader that I'm going to show up as. And those things just like, oh, I'm constantly being surprised and learning from the humans that achieve their potential. And every single time it happens, I'm like, I bet that's how that guy who taught my grandfather how to read, like felt. Right. When it was like, and now this guy's a general, or like, and now this guy's a lieutenant. Who would have thought that he would be so much better at math than me? Right. Like all of the things that would have gone into being able to watch somebody rise in that way. And it's just like, yeah, don't ever underestimate human potential. But if you don't start with human connection, we'll never get to that question. Mhm.
Mm. Well said. Well said. Max, I seriously could talk to you for a long time, and I know we're kind of towards the end. Talking about human connection and to getting to human potential. This is just a fun question I ask all my guests that come on the show. If I asked, the people closest to you, your family, your friends, something about Max, what is just something about Maximus that is something that only would happen to him, that only he would do, that is just so totally Max? What would they tell me about you, Max, to help us all maybe connect and relate to you a little bit better?
I mean, I don't think that it would come as a surprise to say, I really love people and I get in a lot of trouble trying to interact with people or like go down sort of like very unexpected avenues. Um, there, there have been like hilarious moments of where I was volunteering. In 2017, I went to Palestine and I stayed in Bethlehem for a peace conference for the first time. And it rained that night, so I went down the street looking for some ice cream shop that I saw. Ended up looking in through a window, and I saw two young boys in like a hookah coffee shop watching European football, watching soccer. And I like knocked on the door, and like, "Are you guys still open?" And they opened the door, and they was just like, "American?" I'm like, "Yes." Are they going Barcelona? And I was like, "Sure." And they're like, "Come in." And so then I got to like warm up to Barcelona game, and they were just cheering, and it was just like a pure moment of human joy, right? And like we spoke hookah together, and then afterward, they said to me, "Hey, what airport did you come through?" And I was like, "Oh, I came in through Ben Gurion." And he goes, I'm not allowed to go through Ben Gurion. I'll never be allowed to go through Ben Gurion. And I was like, oh, okay. That's like, okay. And like, you are very lucky. You get to go to Ben. And I just would not, never have thought that that was like the question that they
Well,
would
yeah, yeah.
asking.
Why? Because
But
of
it's been so
his,
much, right?
ethnicity or his religion, or I
Yeah.
don't know. Wow.
That- They don't have, so Palestinians don't have real passports.
Oh,
So they
oh.
can't do any kind of security check. And that was the thing that they were really concerned about was like
Mm.
access and privilege.
Oh, wow.
Um, And once again, right, like some of the smartest people, really bright, very like quick-witted, like very, very humorous, and in a place where the environment is just very lacking in opportunities for them. And uh, I like have another story where I was in Vietnam and I missed my bus to go someplace, and I went inside of the shop and it's like, when does the next bus come? And he's like, I'll help you hitchhike. So this guy came out of his shop and he went down the street and we tried to hitchhike, and nobody was going in my direction. So finally he said, I'll take you, like $60, 5 hours on my motorbike. So like $60 is what an Uber costs to go down to Mountain View for my commute, right? Like didn't even bother to negotiate. 5 hours. It's going to take us whole day. Like fine, let's do it. Didn't know him, didn't know anything about him. We went on the bike. We started going down this sort of like got off of the freeway into these night market kind of like shady
Oh
places.
my
And I was
gosh.
starting to feel like, all right, my backpack is in the front seat between his legs, but my camera and all my valuables are in my back. So then if we stop and it looks shady, I'm just going to jump off of the bike and I'm going to roll in those bushes. I'm like planning my MacGyver. And finally, like he rolls up in front of like a big warehouse, and then the warehouse like slowly opens, and a woman comes out. They have like a conversation, and she goes back inside. And I'm like literally just like, I'm gonna start running. I don't know what's going on. Am I gonna get like trafficked? My kidneys? Am I wake up and and then she comes out with like basically a pillow in the most gaudy Hello Kitty pillowcase. And the guy says like, "Oh, this is for you, no charge. I can tell that you are not used to riding." He was like concerned that my butt was going to be too sore riding 5 hours on his motorbike, that he felt obligated to sit down and like get me a free pillow for my butt. And I like, and it's like those things, right? Like you just can never ever underestimate, right, how much just like beautiful beauty there is in those human connections, but you have to be willing to be eyes and ears that show up in places where you can't make any assumptions about the people who are going to be there.
Wow, wow. Yeah, like so many instances I'm thinking of my own life where, random we're very, very similar in that fashion where I've had deep conversations with people next to me on a plane or in another country randomly meeting people and sharing stuff or even just yeah, seeing someone, in a hospital and a janitor and having a conversation about where they're from originally. So, you know what, Max, thanks so much for sharing all of the great stories today, and very well said. I think we can all learn so much from you. Where can people find you, connect with you, know a little bit more about you?
I'm on LinkedIn. That's my primary platform for communication. And I'll send you a link afterwards for anybody who wants to just grab time and chat. I decided I'll make 60-minute free strategy sessions available for folks who maybe want to talk a little bit about leadership or adaptive communication from the podcast. It's just something that's so close to my heart. And I always meet incredible people when I have these conversations.
Awesome. Well, Max, thanks so much for getting on the podcast today. It's been a pleasure, man.
Thanks, everybody.